Mhairi Black.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to start off by congratulating the Honourable Member for South Cambridgeshire and her honest and rather courageous, if I may say so, maiden speech, and it was a pleasure to listen to. Now, I will begin with a rather strange declaration, which is that I agree with the Conservatives. I too believe that work should pay. But the sad reality is that in Scotland, over 60% of children living in poverty come from families which are in work. We've already heard that the proposed cuts will hit those in work the hardest, with in-work families losing, on average, £1,300 in 2016 to 17. We've heard multiple times how that financial gap will be filled with the introduction of the new so-called national living wage, but it is not a living wage. It falls 65 pence short of the real living wage, which outside London sits at £7.85 per hour. And it is for that reason that it should be referred to for what it is, a new minimum wage. If we look across the board at families in and out of work that will be affected by these cuts, we see that on average households will lose roughly £750 due to social security cuts. Households which will benefit from the new minimum wage will gain only £200 from it. That means that the new minimum wage only compensates for 26% of the total losses created by cuts to tax credits. I know how much this government likes to talk about financial black holes, especially when it comes to the SNP, but the reality is that if this government carries on with its proposals, it will be creating a financial black hole of about £550 for roughly 8.4 million people in this United Kingdom. Therefore, it is clear that when we look at the figures, this policy serves no other basis than to push more and more people into poverty, and in particular push more children into poverty. Currently in Scotland, over 500,000 children are in families that rely on tax credits. 350,000 of those children are from over 200,000 low-income families that are going to be hit by these changes. Even if you look at...
I've listened very carefully to the Honourable Lady's comments so far. Would she answer the question which her colleague from, I think, Ross didn't answer earlier? Does the Honourable Lady support the SNP government in Holyrood using its new income tax raising powers in the next year or so to increase Scottish income tax and increase tax credits?
There's 2 points to this. The first point is it's worthwhile remembering that 85% of power over welfare remains at Westminster. Tax credit is a reserved issue. But secondly, when it comes to using the income powers, I think it highlights a deficiency in their initial argument. If there is a need for the Scottish Government to top up benefits, then surely that highlights a fault in the benefits to begin with. The House of Commons Library also tells us...
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. Would my honourable friend not agree that politics is always about choices, and despite the rhetoric about balancing the books from the party opposite, they could choose not to spend £100 billion on Trident. They could choose not to raise the threshold of inheritance tax. They could choose to close completely the Mayfair tax loophole, rather than balancing the books on the backs of the working poor.
I would completely agree with my honourable friend on this side of the House. The House of Commons Library also tells us that these proposed changes will deliver savings of £4.4 billion in 2016-17. But in reality, that really means, as was pointed out earlier, that this government will be taking £4.4 billion out of the pockets of the poorest people in this country. If people are qualifying for tax credits in the first place, then it is clear that their wages are considered inadequate to live off. And considering we can cite credible evidence that the new minimum wage will not compensate for the loss of income created by these cuts, it can only be concluded that these cuts purely exist for ideological purposes and to continue the madness of austerity. As was pointed out earlier, we know that when your average person has money in their pockets, they spend it. So by taking £4.4 billion out of their pockets, that's money out of local economies, further tightening the economy and the pressure placed on ordinary people. Now, the third and final point under which I believe this government should abandon these proposed tax cuts is due to the two-child policy. Are we really saying to people that they should count themselves lucky if they qualify for tax credits, but only for the first two children? The reality is that in Scotland, 54% of families have only one child. Poorer families are no different. So the aspect of this policy only serves to perpetuate the myth and the stereotype that is the poorest people in society that are having lots of children that they can't afford. But on from this, are we really making the disgraceful proposal to our citizens that our government is so compassionate that that we might even consider helping you if you have a third child, so long as you have been raped? Is that really where we are now setting the bar for providing decent opportunities for our children, if they are the product of rape? Forgetting the fact that this is a moral outrage from the get-go, it is also completely unsustainable. How do you qualify for that? Is it that you have to have a conviction of rape? Is it just if there's a claim for rape? It is completely unrealistic. What further damage will it do to women who have suffered a heinous sexual attack if we then make them have to relive that attack by giving evidence to ministerial bodies? Fundamentally, this is an ill-thought, illogical and harmful proposal. Even the Adam Smith Institute have just this afternoon called on the government to reject and remove these proposals. Therefore, I am proud to say that tonight I will be supporting the motion and that the government should abandon their current course of action immediately.